All right, thanks Abhimanyu for joining us. Now, the president and CEO of the US Semiconductor Association believes the current global environment favors diversification of the supply chain. I spoke to John Neuffer on the ongoing trade war and its implications for the semiconductor industry and also India.
Certainly, we're in a kind of disruptive time, but it's in times of disruption that there's often many opportunities. And so we see some real potential here in India. Over the last couple of years, for example, there have been 6 new semiconductor projects announced. That's very positive. And now there's 2 vectors for change in this technology cooperation agreement called Trust and potential bilateral trade agreement, or BTA. We think those 2 mechanisms working together can create a stronger ecosystem here for our investments on the one hand, to help India become a bigger part of our supply chain, but also creating greater market access for our technologies in India.
Right. Do you see more investments coming into India from US companies in the next, say, 12 to 24 months? You spoke about 6 companies. You've got the likes of Micron, AMD, which have operations which are expanding. Are we going to see more?
So I don't run a semiconductor company, but I would just speculate that two things. One, the broader geopolitics suggests there's going to be increased movement toward diversification and more opportunities for India. But India still needs to make the business case. There has to be the right ecosystem here, whether it's regulatory or trade or standards, that make sense for us to invest more here.
Right. Now, speaking about the expectations of the US government, one, of course, a company will invest if there is a business case to do so, and the regulatory environment and the tax environment is viable for them. Secondly, one is an intent, a political intent. Is there now a greater push from the US government to make sure that US semiconductors or US made chips and technology has greater access in India?
Yeah, so no doubt kind of the leaders meeting in February and the government's talking about a bilateral trade agreement create very positive atmospherics for us. But at the end of the day, we have to run businesses. And so you have to have the right environment, business environment here for that to happen. I think if you kind of look broadly, the overall trends suggest there's going to be more of our participation in this market. What I'm hopeful of is that India seizes the opportunity and undertakes the change and reform that's necessary to really grab the opportunity and make the most out of it.
Currently, India and US are negotiating a bilateral trade agreement. How beneficial is that going to be for businesses on both sides? Indian experts are actually calling on the Indian government to reduce tariffs on 90% of industrial goods to 0. What would be the best case scenario that you would be looking for and expecting from the BTA? 0
tariffs would be wonderful. Our industry is possibly the most global industry in terms of supply chains that's out there. We have parts and components that are and finished products that are moving across the borders all the time. That's both to build fabrication facilities or fabs, but also to run them. And we need 0 tariff treatment at the border, and we need customs clearance facilitations that's smooth and quickly. And if India can provide that, it'll make a big difference.
Right.
So through a bilateral trade agreement.
Right. There is a window of opportunity when it comes to semiconductor manufacturing, but it will not be there forever.
So what's happening more broadly is that we're now about a $600 billion industry globally in terms of sales. We're probably going to be a $1 trillion industry by 2030. And it's a 8% growth every year. If you do the math, we get to $1 trillion. It's being driven by AI. It's being driven by autos. So the reality is we need to get a lot of infrastructure in place now to feed that future demand. And the good news is for India, it's not for our industry, it's not a choice of India or somewhere else. The ideal outcome is India and somewhere else, because the pie is growing for the world, and that means each piece of the pie can be bigger if the right ecosystems are in place.
You know, one thing that we hear wherever tariffs are going up, even in India, we're hearing that companies in the US are either canceling orders or they're seeking greater discounts. Do you expect?
Well, I think not just for semiconductors, but I think that's a concern for all industries. Is that trade slows down, and not the ideal outcome.
Right. And finally, on US-China tariffs, even though the US president has put a pause on reciprocal tariffs while continuing the baseline tariff, the tariffs on China have been increased to as high as 145%. How bad is that going to be for the semiconductor industry?
It's not just that. That's not just that. China has slapped back with its own tariffs.
Retaliation, especially.
Yeah. So again, China is obviously a very important market to us in the industry, and again, we're in a wait and see mode, and hopeful that the two countries can find a way out of this so that we can get these tariffs out of the way.
John Neuffer, thank you so much for speaking to us here in New Delhi, and let's see how the semiconductor industry progresses this year in light of the global trade uncertainties.
Good
Thank you
to spend time with you again. Thanks,
John.
Thanks very much.
Time now for a break, but up next, an exclusive conversation with Shobna Kamineni, Apollo HealthCo's executive chairperson, on the other side.